discuss this further, let's bring in our guest from Washington, D.C., Scott Shuchart. He is the former Assistant Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy at ICE in the Biden administration. And from St. Paul in Minnesota is Cheniqua Johnson. She is a city councilwoman. Thank you for joining us. Let's start off with you, Cheniqua. I mean, this must really resonate with the sort of furore we had back in those heady days of Black Lives Matter back in the 2020, the May of 2020 onwards.
Yes, I mean, this is the weight that we're feeling still in our city. I'm standing here right now at the memorial where folks are just stopping by during the day because this weight we're all feeling. And it's been even a circle because recently we had Black Lives Matter leader and reparations leader here in the city of St. Paul, Trayvon Cruz, detained and arrested here by DHS and ICE here just for being able to use his First Amendment right to even protest and to speak up about the injustice that we're seeing.
Scott, how much has ICE changed since you were there?
Well, it's changed enormously in resourcing and therefore in priorities.
Please carry on, Scott.
I'm so sorry.
Scott, carry on, please.
Oh, yes. It's changed enormously in resources. That's changed the priorities. In the past, for all of the administration since ICE was created in 2003, there was a recognition that they could not deport everyone who was legally amenable to removal. And so there was a prioritization, sometimes called the worst of the worst, but for people who had serious criminal convictions, who were being charged with serious crimes, people who had been recent entrants to the United States, where it was important to deter people from arriving illegally by removing them quickly. Now, Congress gave ICE tens of billions, and CBP as well, tens of billions of additional dollars to remove, as they understand it, everyone possible as quickly as possible. And so rather than using discretion to choose people who were a good use of resources, they are just putting their hands on as many people as possible, seemingly to fill this quota of 3,000 arrests a day.
Scott, to you again, that's a little bit more about that. How has the recruitment process all changed? Because, and who are they targeting? Using what some people have called very right-wing language and songs such as "We'll Have Our Home Again."
Yes, the social media and advertising on behalf of ICE and CBP has been really kind of disgusting, hearkening back to the worst kinds of white nationalist memes, and I guess creating some new ones. It's interesting how often artists and singers have to object to their material being used in these campaigns. ICE has lowered hiring standards. They're hiring younger people with less education. They're also rehiring a large number of people who have retired from federal law enforcement. So those might be people who are well-trained, who just retired, say, in their early 50s, who are willing to come back for a few years and draw a salary on top of their pension. And then they are recruiting a lot of people who currently work for another law enforcement agency, a state or a local law enforcement agency. I'm very worried that the kinds of people who would respond to those ads and the kinds of people, maybe not the retirees, but the kinds of people who would come in off the street to start working for ICE for the first time must be disproportionately people who are at least sympathetic to the worst excesses of this administration or to the militias that support the president, like the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers.
Cheniqua, what's it like on the streets there in Minnesota today after those mass protests on Friday? And we'd have White House Border Czar Tom Homan saying that he's restoring law and order in Minnesota. Is he?
It's hard to tell because I'm not sure what actual law and order he's enforcing. What we've seen on the streets right now is independent journalists that are arrested for simply covering a protest when folks are trying to once again use their First Amendment right. What we've seen in our city and in our community, and to be clear, Minnesota has some of the largest concentrations of Hmong population, Karen population, Somali population, and Latino population here in the United States. And so when you're seeing community members arrested and detained because they look brown like me, or they're speaking a different language, or they're being asked if they're a United States citizen, or like myself being forced to carry around a passport, you're not actually sure which law or order they're enforcing at all. And right now, or even behind me, you have folks that are gathering once again because we recognize that even with the dash cams and even with the badges that are in place, we rely on them to protect us. We rely on them to actually to enforce this law and order. But somehow people that look like me continue to die at the hands of police department, but also at the hands of ICE. And particularly in what we're seeing right now, it feels more like the federal government is here to siege Minnesota than to protect us. And I'm not sure, again, which law and order they're abiding by, because there are questions even in our neighborhoods. If the Constitution does not work for us anymore, because we're supposed to have a freedom of speech, we're supposed to have the freedom to assembly, we're supposed to have the freedom of press, and we are watching sometimes the exact opposite of that be in place over and over and over again. So I'm hopeful for that. You know, we have had a new mayor in place for less than a month with Mayor Kali Her, who is the first Hmong American woman to be mayor in the city of St. Paul. And she was subpoenaed within her first week on the administration because we are pushing back as a city in both Minneapolis and in St. Paul against what we feel is not law and order and what we feel is not working with us in the way that we have seen in the past. That partnership is crucial, especially for local, state, and federal leaders. I'm just not seeing that on the ground. What I am seeing on the ground is people being scared to even go outside and get groceries. I'm receiving calls in my neck of the woods from community members who are struggling just to be able to do the things that you and I do and find normal. And that's not okay with me. And that's why you're seeing folks being willing to stand in Minnesota in negative-degree weather, thousands of folks marching in opposition, not to law and order, but in opposition to the injustice that we are seeing when law and order is not being upheld.
Well, when we've got also a federal judge here, Cheniqua, who won't halt the immigration enforcement surge in Minnesota, it doesn't help your cause, I suppose, but, you know, what's it going to take for this community there to heal?
We're working on that healing piece. You know, as a community here in Minnesota, one of the things that makes us unique is we've consistently backed humanity for the last 4 decades, not only in elections, but here neighbor to neighbor. The weather doesn't deter us. The abuse that we're currently receiving from the administration is not deterring us. You're seeing community members come out in large numbers, many unpaid, many volunteering to be constitutional observers. The whistles that you're seeing translating nationwide is really a form of resistance in our community because people are showing up in ways that we have never seen. And they're doing so because we recognize that the murder of Alex Pretti and the murder of Renee Good and the constant abuse of our rights as leaders is not going to be something that we stand for. And so the whistles are a form of resistance, not just in form of noise, but in form of solidarity. The thousands of people that are coming to march are coming from all over the nation, and they're coming here in resistance to what is happening to our neighbors. Not just, you know, you mentioned the worst of the worst. I'm not seeing some of the worst and the worst mistreated, rubber pelleted, detained, hit by ICE, ran by ICE in vehicles, and in many ways, that resistance that you're seeing right now is the form of healing. You know, you can't oppress a certain population of community members and then try to dictate how we heal. And we heal like Minnesota knows how because we speak up continuously, we show up continuously, and you don't need to be a federal employee to stand for law and order or for what's just. You need to be a civilian, you need to be someone who genuinely understands that you have to treat people the way that you want to be treated. That's supposed to be the golden rule, the basic rule of principles. I'm not seeing that from our administration, and I sure want to see it and continue to see it from my neighbors because that's how I'm healing. And I know people are just continuing to want to make sure that they know, our neighbors know, when they're in their home, we're showing up on the streets.
Scott, final question to you. Do you see the administration walking back on this? I mean, by some measures, the ICE budget, by some calculations, is as much as $80 billion, and that's more than the Russian entire military defense budget.
I don't think they're backing away from trying to deport 1 million people a year, but there are some signs that they might be trying to back away from doing it in this blatantly unconstitutional, absurdly dangerous, and oppressive way. This Greg Bongino character, who had been the kind of field marshal for the most outrageous deployments of ICE and CBP since Los Angeles, has been sent back to barracks, and the word is he's about to retire. Tom Homan, who seems to be taking over, is talking about de-escalating tensions. I'll believe it when I see it. I don't actually expect anything to change materially. But they're at least making noises about doing more targeted operations, operating more the way ICE traditionally has, where they go after particular people who they believe to be worth deporting, rather than just trying to grab people off the streets. So we'll see. Obviously, the Democrats have a real opportunity here, having held up DHS funding for another 2 weeks, to pull some of that money back, to put some guardrails on, to insist on oversight, to get rid of the masks, and we'll see if they're able to take advantage of that opportunity.
Scott Shuchart, former head of policy at ICE, thank you. And of course, thank you also Cheniqua Johnson, Minnesota City Councilwoman there.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.